Okay, welcome everybody to this conference. They've let me know we're quite a company here. And we come from all over the world, from Rwanda, from South Africa, from England, Canada, United States, Belgium, the Netherlands. So welcome everybody. And the theme of this conference is how can Rwanda achieve true reconciliation and shared prosperity? It's a big theme. It's a difficult theme, and answers to this question will be difficult. But I think it's a theme that moves all your hearts. The future of Rwanda concerns you all. And today we discuss how to get there together, eventually. Before we start this conference, let me first tell you something about the rules and the order of the conference. We start with 5 speakers on 5 teams. After each team, one of the questions can be asked. You can put questions through chat and to. Okay, I'll see that the speech is not synchronized with the image. So maybe our technical support can do something about it. Well, again, before we begin, let me first tell you something about the rules and the order of the conference. We start with 5 speakers on 5 themes, and after each theme, one or two questions can be asked. You can put your questions in the chat of YouTube or in the chat of Zoom, and please note for whom the question is meant. That makes it more easy to answer. We have 3 people following up on your questions, so they will be fairly dealt with. After 5 speeches, we've got about an hour for questions and answers and discussion. People on Zoom can join in live. If you raise your hand, the yellow hand, and I can see it, then you can ask your question. Please unmute your mic first and mute it again after the question. If you have tips or advice for politicians in Rwanda and the Netherlands, please let us know. We are very interested in all recommendations and advice and tips you can give them. And please, questions and reactions must be short and to the point. Long statements I will not allow. And Rwanda, and surely the future of Rwanda, is something that raises the passion of many people. That's fine as long as it don't lead to shouting and cursing and unrespectful behavior. So if things run out of hand, but I don't think it will, because we're all serious adults here, we can mute someone. At the end of this conference, we hope to draw good conclusions. We also hope to give lots of useful recommendations to the Dutch and Rwandan politicians and to the Commonwealth organizations, as Rwanda is part of the Commonwealth. This conference is organized under the patronage of DOPA. It's a human rights organization and it's very young. It's founded in the beginning of this year. The conference itself is organized by All for Rwanda, also a very young organization. And they want to organize all kinds of activities that helps to achieve a peaceful, harmonious, and prosperous Rwanda. And they want to have Rwandan youth to work with them. My name is Anneke Verbraken. I am an independent writer and investigative journalist, and I'm specialized in the Great Lakes region. I'm your moderator for today, so I'll decide who talks and who can ask the questions. So you'd better be nice to me. Let me introduce our first speaker. That's Gloria Ubishema. She lives and works in the Netherlands and has been politically active for many, many years. She finds if you want to come to true reconciliation, one of the first things to do is to accept the good and the bad that happened in Rwanda. She's looking at the young people in and outside Rwanda to break the circle of segregation in Rwanda. Gloria, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Anneke. Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you for giving me this space to talk to Rwandans and all considered to be friends of Rwandans. So my subject in this conference is, can Rwanda overcome the dramatic and very tragic part of her history? In my opinion, the answer is simply yes, we can. But the key question remains on the how. But before you come in the how, you must identify the tragic part of the history and analyze the root causes. So, what is actually this story that is and what is so tragic about it? Rwandans are very hardworking people, deeply religious, warm with deeply held cultural values of integrity, solidarity, and sacredness of human life. The tragedy is that at the same time, these people have come to kill one another in the most horrendous manner. Contrary to popular discourse that the troubled history of Rwanda is due to irrational hatred between the two major ethnic groups in Rwanda, Hutus and Tutsis, the real problem has been politically and social exclusion along ethnic lines. The political elite has then exploited groups' grievance to the political support of their groups in order to get access to power and have used every mean available to keep a grip on the power. The situation has always been compounded by external powers that favors one group against the other. Therefore, instead of helping to end exclusion, they have supported the repressive regime and only helped to postpone inevitable political violence. The key issue is therefore has been political leadership and not so-called tribalism. The example is that countries like Tanzania, which has more than 100 distinct ethnic groups and tribes, have been peaceful since independence. It is in our considered view that we must accept our history, the good, the bad, even the ugly. We must accept all, accept to take responsibilities for its weaknesses, capitalize the strength. All the great democratic nations have had their dark side in history. We have the US, UK, Italy, France, Germany, even South Africa, and so on. It is the determination of their leaders and their peoples that allow them not to remain trapped in their histories and in their tales to build democracy. The rule of law that respects human rights, that gave them the impetus to put what they are to be where they are today. Allow me to quote Nelson Mandela when he said, "Do not judge me by my success, judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." These leaders think about how to move their people forward and guarantee their well-being, build and secure their future generation instead of spreading time sowing seeds of hatred and divisionalism through collective guilt linked to their past. We, the future generation, we are convinced that if any change has to take place, we have to be agents of that change to build a country where all Rwandans will live in peace and harmony. It must start today and not tomorrow. So, Rwanda has one of the most complex stories in the world, one of the smallest and poorest country in the world, yet known worldwide of its turbulent history. The key problem has been the poor leadership, and the current leadership is, in our opinion, the worst that Rwanda has ever had. Allow me to be very clear on this point, and I'm allowing you to quote me. Rwanda has never known a leadership that has been fairly elected by its people. Nor Rwanda have never known a leadership which has inclusive and protecting the marginalized. We certainly can argue about the most or the least brutal leaders so far, which regime has been the most destructive. It all comes to this truth. Bad leadership is bad leadership. Dictatorship is dictatorship, independently on how bad it is. The exclusion that has marked our society and history has been underpinned by ethnicity and regionalism. The political elite competing competing for power has used ethnic and regional grievances of exclusion to mobilize their groups to fight for inclusion or even to grab power from those who had hold on it. They ended up excluding, in turn, the group that has excluded them. While it is basically not wrong to highlight the grievances of your group, it is wrong that once in power, you fail to understand that you are a leader of a whole country and not a tribal nor a region chief. The problem has been once in power, the new leadership sees itself accountable to those who voted it in power. The leadership fails to understand that once in power, you no longer have the privilege to choose sides. You need to become the leader of a nation, regardless of your religion, region, or ethnicity. From the first republic till now, this has not been the case, unfortunately. Again, the issue here is not about which and who has been more ruthless than the other. It is about political repression and its consequences. We have a history which is always painful to one in order to be fruitful to another, and that's so wrong. And in our opinion, the role of the youth is tomorrow. They are always hopeful, naive, and aspiring. Therefore, they are also easy to manipulate and to use simply by telling whatever they need to hear at the moment. The youth is one group that is always suffering the most, especially the youth of the marginalized side. So they will listen, commit themselves more easier and more quicker to whatever comes along, offering them a solution of a better future. It kind of sounds like the youth are used as marionettes, doesn't it? Well, it is, because that's the truth, and the truth hurts. But we cannot solve a problem which we have not identified nor acknowledged. Rwanda today, it's a country with 75% of population is below 35 years old age. If we take this into account, that means when the war started in October 1990, the oldest within this group will have been 4 years old. This means that the majority of these youth have only known the current regime of RPF. In order to survive, this is a system that embarks on the strategy divide or rule. Thus, people have been divided into categories, namely those who are with us as RPF or those who are against us. The latter is considered enemy of the state, independent of the age, political affiliation, or even social status. We have grown in a system that promotes divisionalism, undermines national unity, which shows us and only teaches us that there is no and should not be a unity for our nation. We have grown in a system marked by clientelism, nepotism, favoritism, and political intolerance. It is a system where a critic is accused of being enemy of the nation. All these have led to where we are today, Rwanda being one of the countries with the longest history of refugees. We are one of the unhappiest nations today, according to the UN report of 2021. We are one of the countries having different opinion than the government will cost you your life before you finish speaking. This is according to Human Rights Report in the year 2021. Being one of the country which hunts its opponents, kills them, kidnaps them, and make them disappear. This is according to Freedom House in year 2021. So Rwanda today, it's a country where it's a full of prosperity, however, with one of the worst leadership in the world. Rwanda is with the highest number of women in parliament, yet women rights are being violated each single day, and those female parliaments stay silent. Rwanda is a country with a graphic of 75% younger than 35 years old. This means 75% of the population have lived through war in our early teens or just born after or during the genocide. Some are survivors of the genocide against Tutsis. Some are the survivors of the genocide against Hutus. Some are survivors of war crimes. Some are the survivors of the current situation, which is being born after the war and become automatically victim of the current regime. One thing we do have in common is that we did not choose what happened. It's not our choice. One more thing we should have in common is willingness to put aside what divides us and build the Rwanda we want. The Rwanda that suits us and that breaks the vicious circle of political violence. So how do we do that? How do we undo the culture which has been cultivated in us for so many years? We need to own our responsibility, our future. We need to accept that our country has a bad leadership until today. We need to respect one another. We certainly need to know that we all have personal stories. We need to acknowledge each other's story and show empathy. We need to acknowledge we have a culture of manipulation. We need to demand our rights to be and to exist. We need to demand our rights to own our story unapologetically. We need to demand respect from our leaders. We need to have a dialogue that one gives a space to all parties heard, and that have to have a history that is all inclusive. We need to have and to ask forgiveness on all parts. We need to hold the older generations accountable and clear the air for the upcoming generations. Some of the way to achieve all this, that could be dialogue, highly inclusive, or even the South African model. So to facilitate all these dialogues, my recommendation is that the youth needs to take a step back and let the older generations take full ownership of the past. The youth need to refuse and reject anything that might lead them to staying in this circle. And the youth need to think of sustainable stability, prosperity of Rwanda. And therefore, we all need to acknowledge our past, embrace all our histories. And therefore, when we arrive there, we believe we shall overcome. So that is my perception of the subjects I was allowed to develop and my recommendation. Thank you, Annika.
Thank you, Gloria. That was a very strong and passionate speech. Thank you very much. I got one question though, maybe two. You talk about the leadership of the current president. But do you think there's room for new leadership after so many years of the presidency of Kagame?
I believe, as you have heard in what I exposed, President Kagame nor the previous leadership have ever given the space for any deviant leadership. So Kagame is not doing any better. At least according to our opinion, they are doing worse. Is there space? We want the space, but they are not giving it. But again, we are 75% of the population. There comes a point where we can demand it and own it. It's no longer on the right or the decisions of the older generations because they are 35%. They cannot decide what tomorrow of Rwanda is and should be.
And do you think the elder will take their responsibility and give the younger generations room to build on their own future?
They might not necessarily find it in their best interest. Then again, allow me to think out of the box. It's not in their interest because how many years do they have left to live their life so they can remain like hanging on what they believe. But if another generation is aspired to leave a legacy to the future, they should be open. Again, we are calling for dialogue. We are not calling for a war. We are calling for a dialogue for the new generation, for the 75%. The older generation, if anything, they should just step off and allow us to have that communication, to have that dialogue. And it would be us to take that step back and say, okay, tomorrow, what is actually, how do we want the Rwanda of tomorrow? And we should be the one to decide it, to vote it, and to actually to put it in place, not on the 35%, which have basically 20 to max 20 years to live for the moment. We should look more on the young ones who have above 50 years to live ahead and who have a new generation. We need to find a way to break this circle of always pending one against another. We can be a nation which is okay to have different opinions, and those different opinions should define us, not divide us.
Thank you, Gloria. I think that's a very strong message for the older generation. And let's go to our second speaker, Mr. Johan Swinnen. He was a Belgian ambassador to Rwanda from 1990 to April 1994. So a very important period for Rwanda. He's an expert on the Great Lakes region, and he wrote many books. You probably have all read his last one, Rwanda, My Story. And for those who haven't, please do, because it's a wonderful read. He wants to discuss the role of the international community in Rwanda. So please, Mr. Swinnen, it's up to you now. Mr. Swinnen, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Thank you so much, Anneke. Very pleased to see you again. After many years, I would say, maybe some 10 years when I was still working on my book. I wrote only one book, not many books, just one book, Rwanda, Mijn Verhaal, which means my story. I hope one day it will be translated and published in English and French, of course. Yes, indeed, as ambassador in Rwanda from August 90, I arrived 6 weeks before the first attack of October 1st, 90, until 12th or 13th of April 94. I experienced only the first week of the genocide. And during that period, I was indeed, as you said, a very important period for Rwanda. I was actively involved in a diplomatic process that accompanied an endeavor for peace, negotiation with the RPF, between the government and the RPF, but also of internal democratic reform. Two dynamics, fascinating dynamics. And astonishingly, at the end of my book of 600 pages, very detailed memories, I couldn't conclude otherwise than raising an existential question. In welk stuk hebben wij gespeeld? Dans quelle pièce avons-nous joué? In which play have we been brought to act? Not only the diplomats, the Rwandese, the neighbors, the politicians, civil society, the military. And indeed, many questions remain after 27 years. And I shall spell out just a few, because it's important, because these questions still dominate and invade our discussions, our debates, our dialogue as in our inclusive dialogue, Gloria was advocating for. And the first question is a very general, I would say an overpowering question. How is it possible? How was it possible that so many people had fallen into the trap of radicalization, polarization, extremism that have led to the abominable tragedy of genocide? Who was behind? Do we see a pre-established plan, a Machiavellistic, diabolic plan, agenda, hidden agendas? Who had the advantage of laying this trap? This is a fundamental question we have to approach with honesty, very openly. Second question, what happened to Fred Rigema? The 2nd, 3rd, 4th, beginning of October 90. Is it true that he has been killed by RPF elements? And why? Because of a divergent political scheme and strategy? Because of rivalries, rivalité between persons of different descent? It's still an actual question. 3, who is responsible for several political assassinations between 90 and 94, or even before 90? General Mayuya, Kapsisi, Gatabazi. These assassinations still not, till today, have not been cleared. Another crucial question, of course, the obvious question: who is accountable for the downing of the presidential plane, April 6th? And here I must express again and again my profound indignation. 27 years later, there have been inquiries, but these were national inquiries. No inquiry by the United Nations, no independent, neutral, objective inquiry, investigation. So no internationally mandated, neutral and independent investigation that would lead to a crucial answer to a crucial question. Another question, and you might be surprised to hear that. Why did the genocide last that long? And when I asked this in the conference, many people, this was a very short period of massacres and genocide. Could it have been since we, and many people pretend and affirm that the RPF have stopped the genocide? Wouldn't it have been possible to stop the genocide earlier? Or didn't the RPF have sufficient military means to have victory and to stop military victory and stop the genocide? We know that ultimatums have been given to the international troops by Paul Kagame, the chief of the rebel of the RPF. And we read it in the book of General Dallaire. I would even add, maybe we should know more about the role of General Dallaire. Another question, why did Europe fail? As a European, I'm the first to confess that Europe did fail. The French and the Belgians did not weigh sufficiently heavily on the peace and Arusha accords, because we were victim and we could not resist sufficiently to the caricature that was made by the extremists of the French and the Belgians. The Belgians being pro-Tutsi, the French being pro-Hutu. I think the history, and let's not make the Europeans responsible for genocide, or even the international community responsible for the genocide. The first responsibles are the Africans, are the Rwandans. But we have to, and I come to the role of the international community. That's what you asked me. The role the international community, diplomacy can play in the future, in the search for a new future of Rwanda. Then we come indeed to that question of the responsibility of the international community. But let's not make only, when we speak about international community, not only speak of the French and the Belgians and the Europeans, but also the Americans, the Clinton administration. And I hope that the United States, and I was in a webinar yesterday with a correspondent, a Dutch correspondent in New York for European media. And I stressed the importance of knowing more about responsibilities in the Rwanda dossier of the Americans, of American companies, multinationals, and the, at that time, administration, Clinton administration, American administration. These questions, among others, still cloud and obscure the debate today. And we can add more questions linked with recent developments, incidents, and prejudice. Repeatedly, I told the Rwandan diplomats in Brussels that I would be willing and eager to actualize, updating my conversations with the president, whom I met several times in Mulindi, at the headquarters of RPF, in the years and the days before the genocide. And at these occasions, at such an occasion, if I had the opportunity to meet President Kagame again, I would be tempted to ask him, respectfully, addressing myself to a head of state, respectfully, without judging, no blaming, just asking two innocent, neutral questions. First, sustainability of the so-called Rwandan model of development. To what extent, Mr. President, and I would speak also, I speak out the concerns and the ambitions of the youth of Rwanda. To what extent, Mr. President, your model of development is sustainable, how it's going to last, and taking with this ambition of leadership, also the ambition of the people, the patriotic ambition of all Rwandan people, going strong and with faith and confidence in a Rwandan model of development. And second question, when I was in Mulindi with the military leader of the RPF, Paul Kagame, he told me You Belgians keep going, fight for human rights, because in Kigali you are accredited to a dictator who does violate human rights. Keep stressing the need for respect for human rights. So today, in this updated conversation, I would be tempted to ask him, or to tell him, Mr. President, don't be surprised. We read reports of the United Nations, of Human Rights Watch, of Amnesty International, of articles in the press about violations of human rights. What is, I repeat, without blaming, without judging, respectfully, what is your answer, Mr. President? And there is another concern. I would add even a third concern. How to promote these days stability, security, integration, economic and political integration, and development in the Great Lakes region in order to avoid plunders of mineral resources by external forces. We have to integrate these questions. We're talking about the role of international community. And I will not speak on behalf of the Rwandan people. Others have done it and will do it. But coming to the role of the international community, to the diplomatic community, we have to integrate these questions, these concerns, as well as a positive complicity with the Africans into a sound, diplomatic, and courageous approach towards the region, but with humility and with honesty. We have to keep striving at searching the truth, because I enumerated questions that still live in our minds, in our memories. So we have to keep striving at searching the truth, the whole truth, including the agenda of the Hutu regime, of President Habyarimana, of the RPF, of Paul Kagame, of the international actors, including the Belgians, the French, the Americans, the Ugandans, Museveni, the European Union, the United Nations, DPKO, responsibility of the Department of Peacekeeping Operations and the Secretariat of the United Nations. As to the actual situation in Rwanda, I would, and you heard it already, I would favor a genuine, open, and indeed, as you said, Gloria, an inclusive debate, dialogue about the sustainability of the development policy and the promotion of universal and the fundamental human rights. Stability and security in the Great Lakes region should also be of a serious concern, of the international community. Just an example, the mapping report of the United Nations may be no longer left without any follow-up. And I support the endeavor and the ambitions and the discourse of Dr. Mukwege. We need dialogue in a sphere of mutual respect. We hear too many slogans, propaganda, histoire fabriquée, conventional wisdoms, pensées uniques, politically correct analysis. All these attitudes have spoiling effects. And to sum up, besides the engagements and the dynamics of domestic forces, I see a protracted commitment of the international community that will enhance, first, the search for historic truth that must sustain the combat against impunity. Second, adequate policies that will pursue sustainable development. 3, enhancing respect for fundamental human rights and liberties, freedoms. And 4th, finally, transparency as to the agendas that might threat or undermine stability and security in the region. So I would say, Anneke, a very ambitious agenda for the friends of Rwanda. But these ambitions will not prevail if there is no positive complicity of the Africans and the Rwandans themselves, to whom I wish them really good luck.
Thank you very much, Johan. This was a very passionate speech as well. And I think you show how things from the past still has so many influences on the future and the now. I think you say there were no independent investigations seeking for the real truth about Rwanda's recent history. And I think you're so right. We must, without truth about what happened, there will never be, I think, real reconciliation. And I think you're right when you say the international community it's not the responsibility of the international community, but of Africa and the Rwandans itself. But you also ask for an open debate, an inclusive debate. Do you think that's possible in Rwanda at the moment?
I would not substitute myself to the political leaders and to the Rwandans themselves. But we can only encourage this kind of appeasement. Maybe we need more patience.
Okay.
Maybe we need more time. And this is very delicate and very difficult aspect that might be, and that maybe has to be introduced. Do we push? Do we have to push now for? Of course, we have to push for respect for human rights. This is a universal concern. This is a concern to everyone. This is not a question of interference in internal matters. That time has gone. Dat is voorbij. But the political dialogue, I think little by little, we have to keep faith. But if this dialogue has to happen tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, I don't know. The Rwandans and the leaders have to be encouraged to keep this perspective open, to make it possible, And maybe little by little, leaders in Rwanda will understand that there must be, of course, there is development, there are spectacular signs of growth and development, but this development, in order to make it this sustainable, has to be inspired by the dialogue that is possible. And now there is expression. The mother of 4 children, Yolanda, who has been imprisoned, the Tutsi mother, she came out with a very strong discourse. But we need, and she was imprisoned. This cannot happen. This is a pity. But maybe this cannot be corrected from one day to another day, but maybe with some patience it will come little by little. And the international community can encourage this move. But
Mr. Swinner,
for this we need runs that show courage.
Johan, can you answer a bit more short, because we've got some other questions coming up for you. I've got one, and could you answer short?
Which one?
One question for you, and can you answer that shortly?
Yes, yeah, sure.
Okay. Someone from the audience asks you, what do you think about the attitude and the action of France and President Macron towards Rwanda and the Kagame regime? As you know, Macron visited Rwanda.
Yeah, that's a very difficult. No, it's not a difficult question. I need more time to reread the speech of the president. I think I would just, in a provisional answer, I would just say, refer again to what I said at the beginning, the search for the truth.
Mm.
And we speak about la responsabilité, because he spoke to, I would say, speak also about la responsabilité de la Belgique. But let's not focus only on the responsibility of the French and the Belgians, but also the responsibility of the Rwandans. And not only of the responsibility of Hutu power, but also the responsibility of RPF and the responsibility of the leaders of RPF. And I think in order to be, I spoke about respect for the partner, for the interlocutor, but we need also self-respect. And we need to try to have the interlocutor showing respect for our position. So we should not be too scared in telling, explaining, as I'm doing today with you, but I'm not a diplomat in official duty anymore. But as I think we gain respect if we speak out of course, in a respectful way, but that we explain also our concerns, our attitude, and our ambitions with we share with the Rwandans.
Thank you, Johan. This was really a good and passionate questions and remarks you gave us. And then we go for, I've got another thing to ask to the audience. Please don't hesitate to send in your questions because I think that would be really valuable for this conference and for the outcome of the conference. So give your remarks, questions, tips, advice to Dutch and Rwandan politicians. Okay, we go to our third speaker. That is Prosper Iragoshima. He's a businessman and an expert on trade with the Great Lakes region. And he takes us to this region and the activities of the Netherlands and Europe in that region. I think we all know that it's one of the most dangerous places to be. Right now, it's extremely dangerous because I just heard there's been a second eruption of the volcano. So last Saturday, there was the first eruption and thousands of people, I think 500,000 people fled to Sake, that's the nearby village of Goma, and Gisenyi, that's the Rwandan sister city. And now there has been a second eruption and all people are scared that there might be the methane gas be freed. And methane gas is really poisonous. So thousands and thousands of people can get killed if that gas is free. It's under Lake Kivu. And if there are fishes in the lake, then it can be freed and can kill thousands and thousands of people. So now everybody is really scared in the region. So Prosper, I hope that you have some words of hope for us for that region, because you are going to talk about the Great Lakes region. Can I give you the floor?
Thank you, Anneke. Yeah, in particular, I emphasize on what you just addressed with regards to the eruption, and which actually is in relation to one of the root causes and drivers of instability and conflict in the Great Lakes region, because one of the drivers and the root causes is the environment, right? Environmental changes. And when looking to environmental changes, we're talking about land degradation, climate change meaning changing weather patterns that affect the livelihoods of the ordinary people, which to one extent results into, for instance, famine or displacement, as we are witnessing currently in Goma. So that is when we're talking about the driver and root causes of conflict and instability from a dimension or a perspective of the environment. But beside the environment, we also have other drivers or root causes of conflict and instability in the region, which consist of political drivers, economic drivers, and social drivers. When we're talking about political drivers, we're talking about, for instance, lack of security, lack of rule of law, and inclusive processes, corruption, impunity. These are all elements that define the political driver as a root cause of instability and conflict. When we're talking about economic drivers, we're talking about poverty and population pressure, unemployment, particularly for the youth, as Gloria clearly emphasized and stressed very well. The majority of the people in the Great Lakes region are young people, right? More than 70% of the populations in the Great Lakes region, and Rwanda in particular, are young people. And they are affected by the economic driver, which is also part of the root causes of conflict and instability in terms of unequal distribution of natural resources, unemployment, as I mentioned. When we're looking at social drivers as a root cause of conflict and instability, we see the ethnic and political mistrust among populations, among ordinary people. We see that migration and population movement are also part of this social driver, which is a root cause of instability and conflict. And then within the social driver, we also have gender inequality, which is also something that we should not lose sight on. So all of these root causes taken into account can actually be brought together in a term that I would call a natural state. I would say that from an economic point of view, many countries in the Great Lakes regions can be considered having been victims of the status quo of a natural state. And what are we talking about when we talk about this idea, this conception of a natural state? In economic science, a natural state is what we could characterize as an order, a social order that is maintained by the use of violence and manipulation of economy, creating privileged interests. And when we look at, for example, if I may speak from my experience as a Dutch citizen, as someone who grew up in the Netherlands, and who looks at the Dutch involvement in the Great Lakes region and in Rwanda in particular, we see that the Netherlands has tried to assist Rwanda to shift from a national state towards a more modern state, meaning a modern society where there's inclusiveness, openness, transparency. But I would argue, and I don't argue this on my own, there are many prominent leaders in the Netherlands that argue this as well. Our good intentions from the Netherlands in Rwanda, for example, have failed because we continue to witness that Rwanda is still a country where the modus operandi of a natural state are still prevailing. A specific example would be, as I mentioned, we see in a natural state that privileged interest, powerful individual utilize violence to give shape to not only the economy, but also to the social order. And if you look at, for example, a good article that The Economist wrote on the role of Crystal Venture. Crystal Venture is the company of the ruling party in Rwanda. basically controls the whole economy. Another interesting reference would be the report of the World Bank last year, elites capturing foreign aid, in which it's clearly stipulated that Rwandan elites are one of the most corrupt elites in Africa. Some sources indicate that the president of Rwanda has a net worth of over 500 million USD. So to define that, this is to define and stress that unfortunately Rwanda still remains a natural state and has not shifted to a modern state, as many financial and technical partners wished Rwanda would become eventually, and shift away from the natural state order of business. So that being said, I believe that young people, the ones that Gloria clearly put emphasis on, we need to come with not only new bold ideas, but a new set of doing things that really addresses those root causes that I just mentioned. Those root causes, those drivers of conflict and instability. Because those, I believe that those, the challenges of the regions are beyond only politics and social, linking back to the eruption that is currently happening in Goma, as you mentioned, Anneke, which is also an environmental dimension. And from a political point of view, you have to have an answer to that, as well as from a social point of view. So all in all, I believe that as young people, we really need to think about, we really need to work harder to inventorize these root causes, these drivers, and structurally think about actions and plans and approaches that go in depth in addressing these root causes and these drivers. And I would like to seize my my input in this conversation to that. And if there are questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Thank you, Prosper. I have a question for you, because you say, well, we need to work harder to a structural approach. And what do you mean by we? Is that the Rwandan youth or the international trade business people?
I think it's several stakeholders, right? Society consists of several stakeholders, whether it's people in youth, so whether it's the youth, whether it's people in a civil society, whether it's people in business, whether it's international financial and technical partners, meaning, for instance, ODA countries, of which the Netherlands is part of, meaning official development assistance countries. All the stakeholders that have stake or have some indirect responsibility in the root causes, or even more important, that can have part into bringing about solutions, we all need to come together and work on structural approaches. I know for a fact, for instance, that the Netherlands, the last 30 years, has been very much involved in really working on addressing those root causes and committing to, contribute to solutions in that sense. And as a person, as a young person, I also see that that I have a responsibility there, together with many other young people, in really also approaching those stakeholders that are genuine and sincere about really tackling the root causes, not the symptoms and the effects. Of course, the symptoms and effects, they are very harsh, right? But we need to go beyond them. We need to really go in depth and really tackle the root causes if we really want to bring about structural change. Anneke, I didn't hear you.
Sorry, I must unmute myself. I wanted to hear something about, I've got one question. You talk also about the economic dominance of Crystal Ventures, the RPF. So is there a real possibility to get rid of that dominance, because it's really there? And I mean, I think you've got your own experience as an entrepreneur.
Yes, there are many options to reduce such a dominance, right? Because let us be honest, Rwanda is an aid-dependent country, meaning it really relies on financial technical support from official development assistance countries. And if they would decide that they're going to make aid dependent on certain clear restrictions of state interference in the private sector domain, then they will have to toe the line, right? Crystal Venture will have to toe the line if they want to receive the financial technical assistance. Beyond that, we also know currently in the European Union, we have a so-called EU sanction regime, which was mainly spearheaded by the Netherlands. It's also an instrument that can also bring about financial partners in the European Union to also impose to such actors that are disturbing genuine development interventions. So that there are actually a lot of solutions, a lot of instruments that can be utilized, can be used to really reduce the dominance of Crystal Venture, considering the fact that Rwanda is an aid-dependent country.
So that could also be a question to the international community to look into that and to take sanctions if it continues like this.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. We'll continue with our speaker, Dr. Egide. He lives in South Africa, and for years he's been an advocate for a peaceful and stable Great Lakes region. He looks now at South Africa, especially at the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the activities of the Rwanda National Unity and Reconciliation Commission. And he's now comparing their strengths and weaknesses and looks at obstacles and chances as we look at Rwanda's future. Okay, Egide, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Annika, and thank you for bringing us together. I still believe that when we discuss our issues as the Rwandans and other people, we like to solve our problems without conflict or problem. So the question is, can the South Africa model be applied to Rwanda? When we ask this question, when we compare these countries in terms of reconciliation, we're looking at Truth and the Reconciliation Commission of South Africa, also a National Unity and Reconciliation Commission in Rwanda. Both these commission, they were created after the conflict, and they need to strike a balance between revenge and also forgiveness. And they could do so by recognizing the crime that have been committed, and the aim was to restore justice and the justice that can bring the perpetrators and the victim together so that they can build a country as a nation. So in South Africa and Rwanda, the crime are a bit different because in Rwanda there was crimes of genocide, crime against humanity, there were war crimes and many other crimes. As for South Africa, we only had the crimes against humanity that include tortures, assault, and many other state-sponsored crimes. And to this end, the TRC in South Africa was essentially to avoid the war in South Africa during the transition from the white minority rule to the black majority rule. So TRC want to build a more democratic future by confronting the evil of the past. And we need to keep in mind that apartheid regime has ruled South Africa for half a century almost, with the racial discrimination, brutal killings, violent attacks, and to build a reconciliation, the TRC needs to grant amnesty to the perpetrators of human rights in South Africa, but also to give a voice the victims that suffered in the hand of apartheid regime. And it was, they made it as easy as possible in a sense that to get amnesty, you simply need to present the commission, TRC commission, with a full disclosure of the fact of what happened, where and how it happened that time, so that the commission can map out exactly the crime that was committed at that time. And then at the commission, you apologize and ask for forgiveness. But for National Unity and Reconciliation Commission in Rwanda, it's a bit vague and broad commission that was given many activities, and some of which do not to really foster unity and reconciliation, but they rather fund the propaganda of the RPF ruling party. But one of the activity of this commission was the creation of Gacaca Court, which when you look, you see that the objective of Gacaca creation was more or less the same as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa. So both TRC and the Gacaca, people need to recall the ordeal they suffered at the hands of the perpetrators. And the activity for the commission was to map out how it happened, what happened, all those crimes of committed against humanity, but with the full disclosure of facts. And the perpetrator, ideally, they're supposed to beg for forgiveness and also request reintegration in the community. At the end, after forgiveness, the people would have been asked to move together so that the nation can go forward with all people together. So if you understand where this the TRC was a commission that dealt with crime against humanity, while in Gacaca, these were informal courts that dealt with many crimes, including crimes of genocide. So the TRC operated assuming that face-to-face encounter with the perpetrators and the victim would somehow heal South Africa and bind the people together and create unity. As for Rwanda, the Gacaca was dealing with the genocide. Somehow they need to have people accountable for the crimes, and that's why people who present to Gacaca in the real terms, they were assumed guilty until innocence was proven. So the aim of TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, was to promote national unity and reconciliation in a spirit of understanding what happened. While in Gacaca, they want first primarily to provide justice to genocide survivors, hoping that the reconciliation and unity would be forged in the process. TRC was not a judicial body. It did not try any crimes and it did not deliver any verdict. Only they heard stories followed by apology and forgiveness. But in the case of Gacaca, the people were tried of crimes, including crimes of genocide, and sentences were issued in jail terms. One of the striking differences between the TRC and the Gacaca proceedings is that in the TRC, all the crimes were included. The apartheid crimes were included, as well as the African National Congress crimes, which was opposing force at that time, also were brought to TRC as opposed. But in Gacaca, the crimes were only limited to against the Tutsi genocide, and the RPF crime was not part of the proceedings of Gacaca. So in that way, TRC represent a true restorative justice and actually prevent good ground for a true and a genuine reconciliation. While Gacaca, when you look well, you realize it was a punitive justice, and to some extent, it represented the victor's justice, of which reconciliation was part of the priority. So the shortfall of Gacaca depends. It was informal first, and it depended on local actors as well as controlled by the government, and dealt with the most complex crimes like crimes of genocide. And again, the initial mandate that was provided to Gacaca was to try all the crimes of genocide, including crimes of humanity and war crimes, not exactly excluding RPF crimes, but the executive mandate that was put in place in 2001. That's the time when the current president of Rwanda came in power. He simply said that the crime committed by RPF were revenge types of crime and that can never be included in the Gacaca proceedings. So So that's why the human rights activists and some academics, they call it executive mandate of 2001, which usually is like an obstacle against reconciliation for Rwandan people. The TRC has some minor issues as well, but not the same level of Gacaca courts. For instance, some academics or law officials simply say that the Constitution is provided provision to prosecute people who have committed crimes, and there is a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that comes into place and they grant amnesty to the crimes that were committed against humanity. The other critics will look at the way the TRC conducted its process, and they realized that only individuals brought to the TRC Commission, leaving the corporate, the business entities, who are at that time also some of them that had committed crimes. But to keep in mind that those corporate, the business entities are also owned by the individual people. So in South Africa, the TRC, as we know, it was headed by the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who tried everything possible to make sure that the TRC deliver its mandate to the wish of the South Africans. And to do that, he managed to combine the spirit of Christian forgiveness together with the concept of African Ubuntu. African Ubuntu means I live because you live. Without yourself, I cannot be. So as a people, we need to work together so that we move forward. So that he combined those two concepts and he managed to deliver the objective of TRC. As for Rwanda, in Gacaca, you will see that like sort of was hijacked. It's like hijacked traditional practice that was used primarily in ancient time or even before genocide to try to solve the conflict, the family conflict, the property conflict, and it was working very well. It's something that people would trust, but it was this time hijacked and it was used to implement what complex thing that looking like international law. And it was not at that level to deliver those implementation, especially in terms of the genocide. So in my own way, when I look at the activities for reconciliation in Rwanda, I found like five obstacles or barriers against true and genuine reconciliation in Rwanda. Number one, I would say that there is a suffocation of the history of Rwanda. The history that the leaders come into place and what happened exactly, it's not exactly the same thing that as we know it. And the second thing is the provision of visitors' justice or maybe trying one-sided crimes. It's been 27 years now after the genocide in Rwanda. And some Rwandans who suffered atrocities in the hand of RPF have never seen justice, and it's no way in the near future maybe to see justice. And worse enough, all the pioneers of justice for all in Rwanda who tried to bring those people together have been eliminated, many of them. Here I'm talking about people like Seth Sendashonga or Kizito Mihigo who died mysteriously. So the third concept, the third obstacle against reconciliation that I would see is the concept of divisionism and the genocide ideology. These concepts are so vague, so inaccurate, so that in a sense that everything you say can be a crime against you. And therefore the people tend to remain silent, keeping the frustration, the anger, and they only see those anger or maybe when they conduct the national survey about genocide and the feelings. Number 4 on the obstacle is the prevention of the right of memory. As I said, there are many people who died in Rwanda, including the Tutsi. The Tutsi have been offered the right to remember, but the people who suffered the hand of RPF have never been given the right of memory, even to remember, even to mention those that the people killed. And lastly, as an obstacle against our reconciliation, I call it international conspiracy, because I think even the ambassador mentioned a bit on it. For instance, we know that the trigger of 1994 genocide against the Tutsi was the killing of Hutu presidents, who were shot down in a civilian airplane. By international law, we know that shooting down a civilian airplane is an act of terrorism, which need to be investigated and the perpetrators brought to justice. This has not been done, or at least now no one has been accountable for it. Second, on the other thing is the ICTR, International Criminal Tribunal Court for Rwanda. This tribunal, when it was put in place, it brought some hope for many Rwandans, because we could see that maybe it's gonna somehow help with the true and genuine reconciliation, because the mandate of this tribunal was to try the crime committed at a certain time, not excluding the crimes of RPF. But when it started its proceedings, it simply prosecuted only crimes that were committed by the previous Hutu government, and leaving out the RPF crimes. So that's a very big thing that we don't even know how to correct as Rwandan, because it's out of our hands. So to conclude, I would say that the Truth and the Reconciliation Commission of South Africa cannot be compared with the Gacaca proceedings, especially because our history and the history is a bit different. However, Rwandans need justice. We need justice that provide rooms for the truth, but not only that clears our fears, but also provide a good ground for a genuine and a true reconciliation between all ethnic groups. The genocide that was committed in Rwanda it's a shameful act to the Rwandans and to humanity as a whole. But worse enough, ignoring all other crimes that was committed by the other people in Rwanda, it remains a big obstacle against reconciliation for Rwandan people. And I will end on the words by the Father Andres Bomana, who was a Catholic priest, I think he may died in the early 2000. He was also trying to bring the two sides together in a sense that everybody would understand anybody's problems. But he simply said that there are many men and women who risk everything in their life to serve their neighbors. Those people have been denied the recognition, and yet they exist, and yet there are many of them. So on my side as a Rwandan, I would wish to see the current leadership in Rwanda trying at least to provide this type of recognition. It may look small, but it can be a seed for the beginning of true and genuine reconciliation. Lastly, I would wish to ask the international community and all peace-loving people to speak out and force the government of Rwanda to look back and see how they can recreate new means for a true and genuine reconciliation. I stop here and I thank you.
Thank you, Egide. Thank you, Egide. That was a real call for truth. And for me, it was really revelating to see you compare the two systems in Rwanda and in South Africa, and why the South African system can't work in Rwanda. I've got a question. Do you think Rwanda needs not only independent investigations, but also an independent investigation community like the South African model?
Thank you for the question. It's true, actually, maybe I have forgotten. The TRC was independent. It was operating independently out of the government, as opposed to the proceedings of Gacaca, which was controlled by the government. What we need for now, the government of Rwanda would say that many things have been done and that reconciliation has been achieved. But when they do national survey, they find things different. So I don't think we need investigation for now. What we just need willing leaders who can help people to come together, and come to an understanding. The first thing we need to understand is our past, no matter how bad it can be, and our history. And by understanding those two, we will be able to forge our shared history and move together as a nation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We're running a bit late, but people can still send in their questions and reactions to these speeches. And we go to our last speaker, Natasha. She's a professional in the digital industry. Welcome. She's a founding member and former president of human rights organization Jumbo. And she has been committed to matters of social injustice with the emphasis on refugees and victims of violent mass crimes in the Great Lakes region, and that for over 15 years. You don't show it, Natasha.
Thank you.
Natasha will talk about the truth, a word that has been said many times this afternoon. And it's also becoming a rare phenomenon with all that fake news that we had these last years. And she will show how Rwanda manipulates the truth, and she calls for action, also for responsibility and solidarity. So go ahead, Natasha.
Hi, Annika. Thank you for handing me the mic. I'm very excited to be here today and continue this conversation. We've been having this conversation within Jumbo for the past decade, and I'm glad that with All for Rwanda and the Friends of Rwanda, we are able to continue and proceed with our reflection, and maybe tomorrow have some solutions. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the platform, HMG Studios. And so without further ado, indeed, I wanted to touch a little bit on how we can achieve true reconciliation and shared prosperity. The first thing to address and acknowledge is the barriers to that happening. We look at Rwanda today and we see that it's virtually impossible to pretend to have achieved this truly today. If we are to trust the statistics, I think the union or the reconciliation statistic today says that we are over 90% reconciled as a people. And the question that I have when I hear stats like that is, which people, who are we talking about, and who is concerned? How do you even measure that? What we know today, we know that achieving shared prosperity comes through having mechanisms like Prosper was touching a bit on, that allow for the generated wealth within your country to be shared across your citizen. But if we look again at the case of Rwanda, we see that the education itself has a poor state. We have one of the weakest, and it's sad actually to have to acknowledge that, but our public education system has been subjected to numerous exchange of ministers. And if we look at it today, the level of education doesn't put us in a situation where we can trust that our youth that are coming out today are able to stand up for their rights and actually benefit from these opportunities that are being created. Healthcare is a problem, justice is a problem, but when we look at all of this, basically the conclusion is the government failed in providing the policies that would entrust us as a people with true reconciliation and shared prosperity. But once the government fails, it becomes the responsibility of each and every one of us to step up and actually take our responsibilities as well. So what can we do? What can the youth do? What can people who are in the diaspora do to actually help this situation? And I would like to emphasize two things. I'll focus my intervention on the truth, because a lot of things that I wanted to address have also been touched on, but I really, again, would like to come on the point of the truth. Reconciliation at 90%, with which truth? The basics of any process of reconciliation has to be the truth. If we look at Rwanda today, there is an official narrative. The official narrative dictates us who is eligible to be recognized, to be heard when it comes to the 100 days of the genocide. Which dates are we able to commemorate are officially dictated. Which victims are allowed to be remembered is officially dictated. So within Rwanda, within the boundaries, the borders of Rwanda, this official narrative is enforced by violence. We all recall the cases of people who have been jailed for not holding a candle, people who have been, who have faced serious consequences on their lives. The example of Kizito Mihigo is one clear one for all Rwandans. Basically, within Rwanda, deviating from the official narrative is enforced by violence. So it becomes heroic to be able to talk about other victims than those who are recognized by the official narrative. Now let's go outside of Rwanda, because this imposition continues also. What happens when in April anybody attempts to show their support to the victims of the genocide against the Tutsi in '94 publicly and makes a mistake on the naming, he gets crucified. If the person hasn't stated correctly that it's the genocide against the Tutsi, he will face consequences. If that person happens to be outside of the official narrative this time, it's more than just because the violence that we know within the boundaries takes another shape outside the boundaries of Rwanda. That's where we have people being silenced because they're talking about the Hutu victims. People not being allowed to have certain platforms because they're not talking about the right type of victims. This happens to Jambo, this happens to all the people who advocate and speak loudly, or at least clearly, about a truth that is outside of the official narrative. Now, how does this affect all of us? What happens is that people start censoring themselves in order to be allowed to speak out. I'm not going to go into many examples, but talking about the Hutu victims in Rwanda is basically one of the, let's say, assured reason for you to get canceled. So the cancel culture that we have in the Western world, because people are afraid to face the backlash that will come if they do not follow the official narrative. So people will cancel you. What else will happen is you may censor yourself. You may start speaking using the right vocabulary, and that's where we fall into having conversations that are not genuine because we are afraid of using the words. Now, let's take a step back and look at this on a longer term, because we're talking about generations after generation. After a while, when you're talking the truth, but not the entire truth, we are diluting this truth. It becomes not the truth, because if you cannot say what happened to you or to your family, naming the criminals that did it, if they happen to be from the RPF and you cannot say that, after a while, you will no longer be telling your story, but telling the official narrative as well. So as we go on and as we continue to address these problems, we are not helping the next generations, because the next generation inherit only this part of the truth. How can you ensure that our children will know where we come from if they are unable to truly, without compromise, say what happened to us or to our parents and grandparents? So after a generation, we are basically taking the oppression that is coming from these leaders that have a political agenda with it. We're taking it and giving it forward to our children by compromising our truth. And we do this, why? Because there are true consequences, of course. It's not imagined. When we say being cancelled, this is a reality. When we talk about being intimidated in Rwanda, being beaten, this is a reality. So the violence is real. Now, how do we go about it? Another question that I get also a lot from younger generations, younger than me, is, okay, it's very complicated when we try to understand and talk about Rwanda. Yes, it's complicated. It's not easy. But if you are able to grasp the mechanisms behind the Black Lives Movement matter, if you're able to understand what's happening in Iran or Iraq or Syria, you can also understand what's happening in the Great Lakes region of Africa. All you need to do is have the courage to address the situation. One thing that I would give, though, it's true that it's not easy, but you have to take the time. You have to take the time to educate yourself, because if you try to understand the situation of Rwanda without looking at Congo, at Uganda, at Burundi, you will not grasp it. I guarantee you'll be trying to solve an equation without having all the parameters. So this is basically not going to help you out. But so how can you understand what's happening? Reading, following conversations such as this one, going to conferences, educating yourself, because you need to get some information and decide for yourself, have your own critical mind so that you can make out for whatever action that you think you would take. After educating yourself, there's no point in having a PhD in our region and not doing anything about it. It is our responsibility to look straight in the face of the anomalies that we see, whether it's in the front of, I don't understand why France is currently now doing this move. I don't understand why nobody's talking about the responsibility of the US or the UK. You have to look at the anomalies and now go try and understand what's behind it. And I guarantee you, you will start to understand and connecting the dots if you take the time to educate yourself. So how do we, what's our role in this? Our role is to, after having this input, after educating ourselves, is to act on this knowledge. The fact that I'm here today speaking about it is because yesterday I heard somebody else talk, and this was a key, an extra key that I received in order for me to understand what's happening to me, to my people, to Rwanda, and to the region around it. As I said, you cannot understand Rwanda without understanding the DRC. So what's happening in the Congo? Why is it so important? What's behind these economic struggles? How does this translate in my day-to-day suffering? These are the kind of inputs that we need in order to be able to move according and to touch upon the issues that are important to us. To the youth, I say connect the dots. It's your responsibility to educate yourself, because nobody is going to force you to look at these videos. Nobody's going to force you to read those books. However, if you want to know what's happening, you need to do that. For the diaspora, I've talked about the situation within the borders of Rwanda. However, if we are outside, we enjoy the freedom of the Western countries in which we live. This freedom have to come with a responsibility. We need to exercise our freedoms. We need to exercise these opportunities that we have to call out on our elected officials, because in democracies, accountability is not just a slogan. We can call out our leaders to say, hey, I don't understand this move that is being done. Why isn't the Belgian government, for instance, not reacting louder on the Rusesabagina case? They will tell you quiet diplomacy, they will tell you that efforts are moving, but then you can compare the Rusesabagina case, which is the actual real-life hero of Hotel Rwanda that you all know. You can compare this to the Protasevich opposition lead in Belarus, which is very, very recent. That's an anomaly. What's happening? We need to be louder. Basically, my conclusion when I look at situations like this, we are not being loud enough. We need to be louder in demanding our Western governments. How come we are reacting like that? Does African lives not matter as much as European lives? Human rights that we are talking about, these human rights abuses, the mechanism between the Belarus case and the Rwandan case of Rusesabagina, why is the reaction different? It's up to us to ask to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to our leaders, to see what's happening. Implications of the implications behind it, the multinationals behind the plundering of Congo, etc. We have these multinationals being vested in Canada, in the US. The citizens of Canada who have an interest in here can demand the answers on corporate social responsibility. How is it possible that you can be benefiting from these blood-drenched money and prosperity? We need to ask questions. Basically, we need to be louder in this. I'd like to give a few recommendations, Annika, if that's okay, especially to the youth, who is the younger generations who are following us. there's a few interesting conversations that I've followed lately that I would like to share with the audience. If you would like to understand the police brutality that we notice when we look at Rwanda in a daily basis, we see people, mothers, elderly being beaten in a inhumane way. I'd like for you to check out the conversation that actually was hosted here on HMG Studio recently on the Pan-African solidarity. In this discussion, Sister Salome talked about police brutality, the militarization of the police, and the type of training that they receive. There is hints and keys to place this into our own situation and to understand better where this is coming from. The second thing that I would like to touch on is the inaction around, we was mentioned earlier, the terrorist attack against the plane of which triggered the genocide in 1994. Understanding the inaction and the reasons behind this, which is totally not understandable, I invite you all to read Charles Onana's recent books and conversations that he's been having. It's interesting because you can get your keys, of course, remain always critical. Understanding the level of denial and the hurt that the Congolese people expressed following the speech by Kagame on France 24 and RFI. I invite all to research, do your own research on the mapping report, on the movement that is called COPAX, KOPAX, by the Congolese, I think it's personalities, associations all together, and look at the letter that was written also following that. It will help you understand the regional dimension of the issues that we are addressing. The inaction towards Kagame's crimes, the RPF crimes, please read up on Patrick Mbeko's work on the geostrategic interests that are in the region. Check it out for yourself. Listen to analyses by Kemi Seba, and then make your own opinion. Because researching the truth and understanding what happened to us in Rwanda has to go through the regional dimension. And I invite everybody to try and do your own research and have your critical mind, connect the dots. And once you've seen the regional dimension of this, I strongly believe that the imperative of solidarity as well becomes, it imposes itself. You cannot then just focus on our matters in Rwanda without being solidaire to our friends and sisters and brothers in the Congo and throughout the region. So basically, I would like to conclude my message here. The first one being political education. It's important for us to understand what's happening, and then that goes necessarily by doing the effort, putting your big girl shoes on and going into the research. Second, once you've done your education, do something about it. Speak up on anomalies that you see. Show up at events like this so that you can share the information that you also have to others. Speak up, show up, do not compromise the truth. Because the minute you start compromising the truth, the minute you start censoring yourself, you are working in the hands of oppression, and there is no way that we can achieve, whether it's reconciliation, there is nothing sustainable that we are going to build together as a people if it's not based on the truth. No truth, no justice, no justice, no peace. No peace, no reconciliation. Thank you, Annika. I think I've been a little over time, but that's what I wanted to share with you and the audience today.
Like everybody, Natasha, thank you very much. It was a really impressive call to educate yourself, and I hope that everybody will, because we don't need any false truth anymore in this world. I will keep it short this time because there are also other people who want to ask questions, and maybe we have someone who wants to have a short word. Bernard, are you there, or have you already left us? I don't know. I don't think so. Okay, well, I don't get any reaction, so we just continue with the questions. There are some very interesting questions. A lot for the panel, a few for the ambassador, and well, let me start with a question to Ambassador Swinnen. And the question is, why do you think that the international community has been silent about the war crimes committed by Kagame? And why continue to ignore the call of Dennis Mukwege and others to set up an international tribunal for crimes in the mapping report? We've got several questions around that. We know, for instance, the Dutch government from the beginning had been aware of crimes against humanity committed by the APR. But until today, the Dutch are acting like it didn't happen. Can you explain this attitude? Can you explain why the international community does this?
Thank you, Anneke. Thank you for that question. I don't think the international community has been silent for crimes committed by in Rwanda and in the neighborhood, for instance, in the Congo, but not only in the Congo. Come to the mapping report. This is a very important signal given by the international community, by the United Nations. But indeed, I share the frustration and the indignation that 10 years later, there has not been any follow-up of this mapping report. And I co-signed a paper in Le Soir a week or two ago with 3 other persons with a very critical review of the book of Patrick de Saint-Exupéry, La Traversée, where it's really humiliating and ignoring and having a very severe judgment about the mapping report. And it's a very strong position against the intoxication that Patrick de Saint-Exupéry continues to spread around, because this is really a book of mensonges, of lies. There was another reaction, and this, I think this the petition is still going around, that I signed a few days ago, against with indignation indeed about the report Duclerc, but also the ignorance or the criticism of the mapping report, and pleading for the truth. And I think this is a word and a claim that is very present here around the table, is the search for the truth. That's so important. And we cannot speak about justice, we cannot speak about reconciliation, we cannot speak about development and stability and security in the region and in Rwanda if there is no clear answer to the questions about the truth. The truth of 1994, the truth of 94, and the truth of what happened after 94. So, but this is still an endeavor. I think a mission for the international community. I agree. We must keep expressing awareness about what happened in Rwanda, what happens in the east of Congo, what happens with the mapping report, what happens with human rights, and what happens with the future of Rwanda. But indeed, this action of the international community can only be credible if there is also, if it responds, if it can join in an internal dynamics and the dynamics of the diaspora. And I'm very happy to know that someone of Jambo is around the table. I know the people of Jambo. This is a very important and very credible and a very very important voice, a moderate voice. And we have Hutus and Tutsis, and there is in this body of NGO there is a reconciliation effort, and I think the ethnic dimension and the ethnic profile of people are diminishing, and there is a fight for human rights. There is a fight for democracy. There is a fight for rule of law, and these people, and because we are speaking about the youth has to be heard. And I'm advocating our political leaders, my Ministry of Foreign Affairs, listen to them. Listen, we must listen to them. I'm telling this also to the press, to the media. For instance, the disappearance of or the death of
Johan, does the media and the politicians, do they listen to you when you say listen to Jumbo?
I don't dare to make this assessment. I keep trying, and I know I can tell you, I can assure you, many politicians listen to me, or they come and see me, they call me, and I'm very pleased for having a politician at the phone, but I cannot pretend that all politicians listen to me, because I'm a retired diplomat, and I'm speaking maybe a little bit too loudly, or too often, maybe not too loudly, but too often and to too many people. So, and I do not please everybody, because the truth, or the search of the truth, does not is not really the thing for everybody, because, well, we have also, with all respect, we have also cautious people, cautious politicians, who do not dare or do not think that action is immediately necessary. So I try to find my way and to find all the sensibilities, all kinds of degrees of commitment for peace and reconciliation in Rwanda. But I was talking about the press. That's important. The media, and not only the traditional media, also the modern, the social media. When Kizito died in prison, I wrote a column in French and in Flemish, in Dutch, in the Standard or the Morgen and the La Libre Belgique. And there were two indignations. First of all, of course, a gospel singer who was singing about reconciliation and mourning, right of mourning for all the victims, not only the Tutsis, but also the Hutus. But he was, that was, and he died. But how did he die? I don't know how he died. But I was very much stressed because there was no, in the Belgian press, there was silence about this. No emotions, even no news about. And I protested against the silence of the Belgian media in the Flemish and the Francophone press about, except maybe Lviv. Lviv wrote an article. My friend François Jean Doté.
Okay, Johan.
So many people
sorry. Yeah. Johan, sorry, we're running a bit late, and I've got a lot of other questions. So please, can you?
Yeah. So we have to, and I'm repeating the concern that was expressed. Fight against impunity.
Thank you.
Fight against impunity, and the international community has the les outils, the instruments.
Yeah.
We have a Council for Human Rights, and and through our national governments, through our national politicians, through our NGOs, because the NGOs have also droit au chapitre, I think is an overall a very multifaceted commitment to sensibilize people for the truth and respect for human rights in Rwanda.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you. I've got a question for Gloria. Gloria, it's about how can you bring the youth of the diaspora and Rwanda together, because that might not be easy. How about youth organizations operating inside Rwanda? Are they doing enough to empower the young? So it are some questions together. Could you answer about this?
Yes. First of all, I think there is a misconception thinking that the youth in diaspora are the more loud and the more against the current regime. But that is far from the truth. The only difference is, like Natasha elaborated, is that the youth in diaspora, we can use the freedom of the speech in the countries where we are. And we are using it, while the youth in Rwanda, they are still under a regime where fear has been taught, where they are still afraid to talk, where they are still afraid to have these kind of conversations. So what can we do for us as the diaspora youth? We can reach out through the organization which are pro-regime, which are here, starting with the embassies. I know that we invited the Dutch, the Rwandan embassy in the Netherlands. They did not reply, nor did they show up. I still don't see any questions, which is actually rather unfortunate, because this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to have this conversation, we are trying to have this dialogue, but once we are reaching out, they're not replying. The only way that we see, and the only time that we see any reply from them, is when there is an attack on social media, which is really basically a war on social media instead of having a conversation. As an ambassador, maybe Ambassador John Swinen can advise us on that. When we reach out as an organization, or the youth, Jambo, or for Rwanda, we reach out to the embassy, and should the embassy not take responsibility to come to us and have that communication with us, because at the end of the day, they represent the country we are talking about. It's their duty, even though we might not agree. That's what we are talking about. Let's all have a communication. You have your truth, I have my truth. Let's talk, let's have this dialogue. Instead of doing that, they are rejecting any dialogue we are proposing. They are the only solutions they are aiming so far, what I have known. They approach individuals in the back rooms. They approach you to say, we will receive you, we will talk to you, but on one condition: you have no right to talk any negative about the Rwandan regime. That's not the democracy. At least that's not the democracy and the freedom of speech that you, as the youth of diaspora that we are used to, that we want to have. In the dialogue, they should be able to listen. An embassy, it's actually a parent. And a parent should listen to a child when they are screaming. Right or not, you need to listen why a child is screaming. So these are the steps we are taking. I cannot be naive and think the solutions will be tomorrow, but social media is on our side. How is it on our side? We live in a time where I don't need embassy to communicate to people in Rwanda. I don't need a radio Rwanda to talk to people in Rwanda. The best thing will be a communication and a dialogue, but until they accept it, we use the means that are available. And Rwandans are listening. Believe me, Rwandans are listening in Rwanda. The youth is listening. They are reacting to us. They are sending us messages. They are encouraging us. Some are having the challenges, the challenge dialogue with us, not even agreeing with us, but at least having that that conversation. This is happening regardless of how the embassies may be reacting, or even the current regime.
Thank you, Gloria. I've got a question for Prosper that is connects with this. Prosper, there's a question here asking you, what do you see as concrete, bold actions that need to be taken by youth, for example, to bring the change in Rwanda?
Yes, that's a very good question, Anneke. I think the answer to that question would be that there's a wide range of dynamic actions that needs to follow. And I think what is one of the most important actions among those wide range of actions is to engage with key stakeholders that have stake in that region, and that are in particular genuine about resolving instability and conflict, meaning resolving the root causes of conflict and instability, as we mentioned. And key stakeholders are foremost the countries in the regions themselves. So if you look at countries like Tanzania, Burundi, Uganda, but even Rwanda itself, you need to engage with key stakeholders, and also, of course, the financial and technical partners who are, let's be honest, who are very paramount in financially sustaining a country such as Rwanda. So you really need to engage with them. And I think what is also very interesting in this era in which we find ourselves, if we look at the fact that the main official and development assistance countries that assist Rwanda in a financial and technical way are mainly countries in what we call the Nordic countries. Nordic means like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, but also the Netherlands. We need to approach a particular organization in the civic space, meaning civil society organizations that are credible in voicing serious concerns with regards, for instance, to impunity, reforms in justice system, sustainable development. We need to actually engage with those stakeholders, particularly in civil society, to really rally around teams that can speak to the imagination of different people, whether it's people in the region, whether it's people in those countries that are supporting a country like Rwanda. We need to rally around teams that relate to everyone, and based on those themes, you can then formulate actions that then interrelate with those teams. So I would say, I would summarize my answer with, we need to really work on addressing solutions for those root causes and drivers, and show and demonstrate that we're working on solutions that are practical and that are really tackling those drivers and root causes.
Okay, thank you. And you talked about teams. What do you need to get these teams in action?
A very simple answer. For instance, the Netherlands, to give an example, it's not only the Netherlands, also Norway has this as well, Germany as well. The Netherlands, for instance, has a program called Power to Voice Partnerships. For people that are sincere and genuine in civil society, that really want to bring solid change in that region while addressing the root causes, that Power to Voice Partnership program is a specific instrument or a specific assistance to change makers, right? Change makers in civil society, organizations such as, for instance, Jambo or All for Rwanda, whatever organization you want to pinpoint. A program such as the Power of Voice Partnership, it's an example that I'm giving, is a very tangible program that the Netherlands has initiated, knowing that the regular programs have failed to voice the concerns and the problems and the challenges of whether it's minority or the unheard or those without a voice or those that are the receiving end of repression. So those kind of programs are programs that can really assist civil society stakeholders that really wants to work on addressing those root causes. I just mentioned an example of the Netherlands, but countries like Norway have many of those kind of programs. The same thing with Germany. But once again, what we need to understand is also from our end, as those who are advocating for really fighting those root causes, there's a level of organization that we need to work on. There's a level of engagement and except for engagement, a level of consistency that we have to preserve in order to provoke that engagement that we are asking for from those stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. It looks very promising, but sometimes I think those projects are also, well, not really consistent. You do something and then it stops and then something else starts, and but let's not get into that discussion now. But well, I'm not really positive about these projects of countries. I've got a question for Egide. It's about sanctions. The question is, do you think the international community will be able to impose sanctions on Rwanda? And my question would be, do you think it's necessary to have sanctions on Rwanda?
Is that a question to me?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I heard you. I don't see why it should get to the level of sanctions, because sanctions should be put in place once every other channel have been tried and have failed. We would wish to see rather the people of goodwill trying everything they can and bring out those voices, as the other panelists have said, to be able to bring the leadership of Rwanda and the other peace-loving people to help in attempt to bring about true reconciliation of the Rwandan people. So I don't think sanction, of course, will cripple the economy and possibly force the current leadership to accept something they were not willing to accept. But it would be better if we somehow bring the positive effect without really harsh life to the people and to the Rwandan people themselves. But if it need be, it shall be put in place, at least so that we start a new chapter, at least to bring about the reality to our people, and so that we can move together as a nation. For now, I still believe that true and genuine reconciliation has not been effective, and we still need it and crying for it. So I would say that it's yes and no. That's my answer to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I've got a question for Natasha, asking, well, if you want people to educate themselves in Rwanda, discussing things with each other is also part of the learning curve. How do you see that in Rwanda itself?
In Rwanda itself, well, basically, we've talked about the boundaries that there are to freedom of speech, to freedom of expression. I sincerely cannot sit here and pretend to have the solution, because people face actual consequences of speaking out. We've seen the case of Tizito Mihigo, who's faced horrible demise after making a song. We've seen the case of Idamanje, who's up until now is still in prison for speaking out on her YouTube channel. We've seen the case of Chuma Hassan, the journalist who's been jailed and then freed with all charges being dropped just for filming the wrong kind of story. So pretending to sit here and give lessons to the Rwandans within Rwanda on how to speak, I would dare not, because it goes beyond just talking. It goes it's talking. We are talking about the physical integrity of people. But I address my message to the leaders of Rwanda because they have a responsibility in this. They are the ones who have been given the responsibility of our lives. So they need to act on this state. They are the ones who should put in place the, let's say, the needed let me say environment so that people can express themselves. And when we see that they fail to do so, we need to call them out on that. And when our voices don't go far enough, we need to also advocate towards our external partners, like the stakeholders Prosper was talking about, because without having this conversation, nothing that we will build will be sustainable. Nothing will last for long if there is no true expression of the people's concerns, desires, aspirations, dreams, critics. Whatever it is stifled currently in Rwanda. So to answer that question, I think we need to first look at our leadership and demand that they create the necessary environment, because this is not the case up until today. I cannot ask an ordinary citizen to take the responsibility of putting his own life in danger just to have a conversation. Let's look at what's happening before that so that these conversations can happen. Now, towards the youth on the outside, there is no limit. There is no limit there. There's no excuse, and it's actually very selfish not to exercise these rights that we have. So I think that would be my answer to that question. Annika, I cannot hear you. I don't know if...
Sorry. I'm trying to do 5 things at the same time, and unmuting was not one of them. I've got a question to Prosper. It says, it's clear that the Netherlands keeps collaborating with Rwandan justice despite the reports on human rights abuses, showing that the situation of the justice becomes worse and worse. How can policies of such a country can be reviewed and changed in order to have a better impact? What can we do as Rwandans, especially young Rwandans?
Thank you for that question, Anneke. I think that it may sound somehow surreal, but we need to raise awareness. Many Rwandans are at the receiving end of the consequences, right, of the Dutch policies in assisting Rwanda or the regime in bringing about justice reforms. And because Rwandans are at the receiving end, you cannot blame us that we assume that others somehow also relate to it, right, or are aware of it, which is not the case. The awareness is not sufficient, even among our leaders in the Netherlands. Even among our leaders, there is insufficient awareness about what the reality is in Rwanda. For example, let me give a very simple example. Last week, there was a very good vlogger, popular vlogger on LinkedIn, a Dutch vlogger, who, he shares a lot of beautiful stories of what he encounters in Africa and promotes visiting Africa. And he was promoting Rwanda as this country that is a miracle, and being in Rwanda and the way Rwanda is moving and the leadership, etc. You name it all. So I seize the opportunity as someone who's very active on LinkedIn and who has a premium profile, meaning when you react to something, then it gets a lot of coverage. I reacted, and with facts, I stated the reports of the World Bank, credible institution. I stated the statements of the U.S. government with regards to the UN periodic review, as well as the statements of the UK. So I mentioned a wide range of things, and many Dutch companies, entrepreneurs that follow this great vlogger, they were kind of amazed, and it triggered this discussion in which they were like, we actually didn't know these things that Prosper is mentioning. We were not aware that that country is a very repressive country with a very repressive climate. So that's about awareness. That's what I'm saying with creating awareness. And more particular than entrepreneurs or vloggers, we have to bring this awareness to our leaders in parliament, our leaders on the level of directorate in ministries, our leaders in political parties, especially those who are responsible for the policy areas of trade and development cooperation, as well as foreign policy. We need to create the awareness. We should not assume that because human rights organizations such as Human Watch write reports, and that we as people who are the receiving end are aware of it, that others are also aware of those unfortunate human rights abuses in Rwanda. So we have to start with creating awareness, and mainly among leaders.
Thank you, Prosper. Yeah, I think you're right. It's to our leaders that you must go and tell your message. And of course, the media, tell them again and again, even if they don't want to listen, because that's something it's very hard to achieve. Yeah, so please keep up. I've got more questions, but we've got time for only more question left, and that is, how can the Johan?
Can I add? I promise I will be very about.
You got the message.
About our leaders, our diplomats, etc., in the dialogue with Rwandan authorities. We should, or they should be aware of the significance, of the meaning, of the importance of three things: respect, showing respect, self-respect, and being respected. So they should avoid complaisance. What's the best translation of complaisance? Complacency. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Okay, Johan. And I hope you will be available to give the people here some advice on the diplomacy and how to handle politicians and ambassadors and etc. Okay. Well, I've got one last question, as I said, and it is for the panel as a whole, but I don't think there's a lot of time to get all 5 panelists to answer. But the question is, how do you see the future of Rwanda? It's a broad question, but I think, and then especially when seen from through the eyes of the youth, how for the youth should Rwanda in the future look like? So who wants first? Natasha?
Yeah, I can go first, I think. I am very hopeful for the Rwandan youth and how I see our future. I see our future as one where we actually stand up for our rights, because I believe that the moment is now. The moment is now for us to tell our stories, so that tomorrow, when there is a common understanding of what happened in the Great Lakes region, that our stories are also represented in the general story that will remain. I am confident because I believe that today is the day where we need to look at our problems, not looking only at ourselves, but looking at our neighbors regionally and looking at the implications. I'm confident that if we remember what true Pan-Africanism is about, that tomorrow we'll be able to face the adversity that we face today stronger with our brothers and sisters from across the borders. I'm confident that if we do the actual work in Rwanda, starting by the truth and nothing but the truth, the uncompromised truth, then we can build on that. For so long we will be in any other setting than that one, I would not dare to hope that there will be a positive outcome. So we need to just get back to the basics. First, start by the basic truth, then build upon that. And I'm confident that we are able to take our responsibilities because it relies on our shoulders. It's time to also look at ourselves and say, hey, what are we doing for that better Rwanda that we want. Not just the West, not just the leaders, but ourselves. What are we doing? And that's my call to action for everybody who's looking, who's viewing, who's following us. Ask yourself, what are you doing? And what does fit your profile? What are you comfortable with? But do something. Thank you, Annika.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else who wants to say something about, okay, Gloria, you go ahead.
I would like to continue from where Natasha just ended. I think every person below 40 years old should ask themselves, what am I doing to contribute to a better tomorrow of Rwanda? And if there is nothing you are doing, you are contributing to actually what is happening today. There is no middle of it. There is no gray place. You are either contributing to continuity of what is happening, or you can contribute to a future, to a better future tomorrow. So if you ask yourself and you find yourself saying, I am not doing anything, then the silence is actually a contribution of the oppression of the oppressor. So you are supporting the oppressor if you are not standing up. And the voice, let me underline this. Contribution does not mean you go verbally or you go publicly, because like Natasha mentioned before, these are people's lives that are online in Rwanda. A contribution means even having a discussion at home, making awareness in your neighborhood, in your children, educating them that what they see is not necessarily the correct thing, and inspiring them for a better tomorrow. There are many ways to contribute, educationally, educating yourself, like she mentioned again. Be aware, create awareness, and until you are doing so, you are contributing and supporting the oppressor.
Thank you, Gloria. Yeah, that's very clear. Anyone else wanted to contribute verbally to the future of Rwanda? No, nobody?
Anneke?
Come on, Johan? Yeah, okay.
Very, very short again. Very short again. Inclusive dialogue, confidence in the potential of the country and the potential and the value of every individual. That leads to Rwandan patriotism, but connected also with efforts for stability and security and integration, economic, political integration in the region. Rwanda is not an island. The Rwandans know that very well. And if on top of that, we can develop a new Euro-African ambition of win-win situations when we rediscover the potential of cooperation between not only economic, but also political, cultural, etc., among Europeans and Africans. Because we Europeans, we must know that in the geopolitical changes that we are witnessing these days in the world, strong relations with our immediate neighbor, Africa, is very important. So for Europeans, I have also a message for the Europeans, not only for the Rwandans, also for the, let's put open, wide open our windows towards Africa. Thank you.
I totally agree, Johan. I totally agree. Yeah. Well, I think we are at the end of this conference. I think I've heard, and I'm not the only one, of course, many very good recommendations, advices, ideas to how to come to a future Rwanda where there's reconciliation and peace and harmony. It will not be tomorrow, and it will not be the day after tomorrow, I'm afraid. As Johan said, we need time. I don't know if the young people amongst us have so much time as Johan, because Young people tend to have less time than the older ones, funny enough. But I think I feel very positive about this conference, I must say. And I think all the panelists for their cooperation, for their words that were really inspiring and passionate. And I think Rwanda must be proud of having people like you. Yeah, I think I totally believe in Rwanda built by people like you. So I can say that as a European, can I? Oh no, no, okay. Thank you all, and I also like to thank the people we didn't see who did the questions. I also want to thank the studio HMG. Without their support, this conference wouldn't be possible. I also thank Dorpa. She supported this conference with their money. Can I say that? Okay, I said it. And I really hope this conference will be a first step in building a new Rwanda that is a home for everyone. So, okay, that's Natasha. Okay, I see your head up. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to invite everybody who's following us as well to stay informed about the horrible human rights abuses that we tend to forget about by following Random Lives Matter, the Random Lives Matter website. Maybe we can put the link later to on the YouTube channel, because it's a track record of people that get killed, disappeared, enforced disappearances in Rwanda. So it gives you an idea of the current state of human rights abuses in Rwanda. I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Annika.
Okay, thank you, because now you give me an idea as well, because in 2 weeks, All for Rwanda will be presenting a black book to Dutch Parliament, and that black book says why people cannot be expelled to Rwanda. As people maybe know, the Dutch immigration service accused 30 to 40 people of genocide activities, and some of them are on the brink of to be expelled to Rwanda. So we hope the black book will alert Dutch politicians and they start asking questions to our Minister of Justice. You can see, by the way, it's the 15th of June. You can see the presentation on the live stream, and Gloria will be one of them who presents the black book. So, well, I think we now have said everything there was to say for today. And again, I thank you all. And I also thank the audience for asking all these questions. That was also very stimulating. So have a good Saturday afternoon. I understand the terraces are open, not the restaurants, but I wish you all a very good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you for having us.
Thank you to everybody. Thank you, Annika, and all the panelists.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you.
Yeah, how are you?